Join us now, Michael Landsberg, Chief Investment Officer of Landsberg Bennett Private Wealth Management. I just like what you're saying. You don't even care about the Fed, Michael. You think they're screwing up, probably, kind of a misstep. Maybe no cuts this year, but God forbid the corporate sector's strong anyway, and maybe that's why stocks continue to go up regardless of the Fed. Absolutely,
Joe. When we're looking at earnings, everything you've pointed out so far, earnings have been strong. You're seeing that with bank earnings so far out. Taiwan Semi came out with earnings. A lot of things are positively happening. And so I don't necessarily know if the Fed needs to be involved. I think you've seen that with the bond market. The bond market's saying the Fed needs to stay on the sidelines, and I think they should.
You think that the leadership changes at all? If it's all based on earnings, then I guess you need to either be in sectors or names that have good prospects in this environment.
Absolutely. I mean, we think we're in an environment where growth is going up, but also inflation's going up. That bodes well for the companies with good balance sheets. Big tech obviously continues to do well. NASDAQ earnings were up 20% year over year. Broadly, the S&P was up high single digits. Those are the areas I think you still want to focus on. Maybe you look at areas like small cap and you don't want to be there because the earnings have been so lousy, but stick with what's worked until it doesn't work. And I think that leadership, again, hopefully it broadens out a little bit to more than a handful of names. But with that being said, those sectors are the ones that are driving growth.
Yeah, the small cap rotation that probably never happened. Maybe we got a couple of times it looked like it was starting. But if rates aren't coming down, that's an area that probably will underperform. And you don't think rates are coming down because you don't think inflation is going to 2%.
No, I don't. I mean, I think the higher rates are not good for small caps. But, I was on the show a few months back, and when inflation was 2.44, I was in a very small camp of people that were calling for it to go back towards 3%. And everybody was calling for it to go to 2%. I saw a lot of those same people yesterday saying that 2.89 would beat expectations. I'm not sure whose expectations it beat. It certainly wasn't theirs because they thought it was going to 2. I think it's going back towards 3.5, not quite 4. But I think that's where we're headed. I don't think it's going back to 9, but higher inflation and higher growth does mean some stock sectors can do well, but certainly it's not going to be an area where small caps are going to do well.
Well, I know that you think the Fed's not going to deliver what traders wanted. Is it going to eventually going to have to take away the punch bowl, and especially in a Trump presidency? I can't imagine that you're going to see someone raise rates.
I don't think you're going to see that in 2025, but theoretically, if the economy continues to do well, one of the things that came out in the last couple of weeks, the small business study was at 40-year highs of confidence in what they see coming out. Those are smaller companies that do the majority of the hiring. If we get an environment with lower deregulation, you could see the market heat up a bit. So I think certainly the Fed's going to be on the sidelines in 2025, but the next move could be rates higher. Again, I don't think that's right away, but that's a hopeful scenario that the economy continues to do well, and it does so well that we have to worry about growth getting too hot.
So where's the 10-year in your world if inflation goes back to those numbers that you were talking about? And the world survived at much higher yields on the 10-year. At most of my life, it's been higher, and when I was in the business, and we were at 7, 8, 9% on the 10-year. Are we headed well above where it is right now, and that's going to be okay long term?
I think it may go a little bit higher. I mean, interestingly enough, since that September low in the CPI, it was 244, now it's moved higher. 10-year and 30-year are up about 100 basis points since then. So the bond market is sensing that, inflation's coming back and growth's coming back. I think it doesn't go, too much higher, but I think that the thought was, I think a lot of people in the market wanted rates to go lower to fuel kind of this, kind of stock buying binge of the poorly levered balance sheets. I think you're not going to get that. I think rates are going to stay higher for longer. You need to have a regime investing wise that's going to work for that. Do I think it goes a little bit higher? Yeah, I don't think we're going to be back to the 1980s when we're 8, 9, 10%. But I do think inflation heads higher here. I don't know where it ultimately ends, but directionally it's higher. And we need to position, as we have been for the last 6 months, for what does that look like for stocks and what does that look like for bonds in an investment portfolio? Are you protected against rising inflation and higher rates?
Why is inflation going to rise?
A lot of different reasons. I mean, certainly when you look at what's going on, shelter hasn't come down much. Shelter's still running, double where it was pre-COVID. You're seeing food prices run back up. And all of my numbers actually, Joe, modeling wise, had oil in the low 70s. Right now it's nearly 80. So I think it accelerates a little bit more than people think. I think the housing is not coming down quite as people think. I think it's sticky. I think it stays here. Again, I don't think it's 9%, but it's certainly not the 2% the Fed and a lot of people in the market were talking about 4 months ago. It's going to probably see a 4 number, 4.0, before it sees a 2.0.
So it's in the system already. It's shelter. You didn't use the T word. You didn't say anything about tariffs. Some of the new administration's proposals factor into why you think it's going higher, or you just think it's already built in?
We had, we run models for a year, and realistically, our 6 month, I think we're pretty accurate on. In September, regardless of who won, we had inflation going up every month for 6 months. I still have it now going up every month for 6 months. None of Trump's policies are in place. He isn't even president yet. So I think a lot of this stuff that's in there. It's got more to do with the economic cycle than it does who's going to lead the country. Plus, a lot of the stuff that's happened, natural disasters, California and the awful fires that have gone on there, that's going to be inflationary. I mean, what happened with the hurricanes, those are things that are these kind of ad hoc things that are also going to put pressure on moving prices higher. So it's really regardless of who's leading the country, you're going to have some inflationary pressures. And then obviously oil now getting up closer to $80 a barrel. That's not a good thing.
Do you take the Fed at its word that it's concerned about inflation, and it keeps mentioning it? I would do it if I were the Fed. I'd say, I don't know. These policies, these Trump policies that we're looking at with tariffs and immigration and these things that are going to happen, this is not going to be our fault because we've already mission accomplished. But we're definitely they didn't say any of that, as we were going to the Inflation Reduction, CHIPS Act, infrastructure. They never warned ever the first time around it was going to be transitory. Now they're worried about, I think it's covering their tuchus.
That's spot on, Joe. I think they were wrong when it went to 9%. It was transitory. They're saying, 4 months ago it's going to 2%, and they're looking for anything they can grab onto. I think there's going to be some pressure on the Fed. Obviously, Trump and his group are not necessarily Trump, Treasury and Fed fans. When they're wrong and inflation goes back up, I think you're going to see some rhetoric between the two, maybe reach some levels that we haven't seen in a while. I think there's going to be some real pressure on the Fed in terms of what are you doing? How come you're so wrong? And you're getting the direction wrong on inflation. And you've done that a couple times. You certainly got it wrong a couple of years ago when it went to 9% and told everybody that it was transitory and wasn't going to affect them.